Good afternoon. Good evening. Actually, we're not 100% sure what time of day it is where you are. But where we are speaking from is our home in Connecticut, United States of America. I am Professor Linnea Brinkerhoff.
And I'm Professor Michael Pergola.
And we are honored to be joining you at this all-important conference. Wonderful that you are meeting at this time as government leaders, as leaders of industry and of academia, students and teachers alike, all of you, and our brothers and sisters at St. Claret's. So thank you for this great welcome. And remember, change occurs in networks, not hierarchies. So all the more important that you've come together. Thank you for this great welcome. And we imagine, since you are on the great campus of St. Claret's, you have gotten a chance this morning to light the great lamp. We would like to join you in that at this moment.
You know, we live at a challenging time on the planet today. There's many more of us than ever before. And our capacity to influence our environment is so much greater than it has ever been in history. Thomas Berry, one of the first geologians, compares the last 300 or 400 years to a geologic age rather than a historical time period. Because in the last 400 years or so, we have impacted our physical environment in a way that previously would have taken a couple of 100 million years. And so we want to talk today a little bit about the ways we make meaning, the deepest values that drive us, our ultimate concerns or deep spirituality, about how that has shaped our ways of relating to our environment in both West and East, and about the ways in which our actions, our behaviors, are patterned by our beliefs, and the way in which our beliefs are structured by the cultures and systems that we are a part of, and influence in ways that are frequently unconscious. And so, we will look at the deep spirituality and values that permeates our various cultures, particularly looking at the way in which a particular interpretation of Western Christianity shaped the American experience, and how that has had so much to do with the emergence of the global society and global economy that increasingly influences all of us on the planet. And we will look at alternatives in Eastern and in particular in Indian spirituality and how it might be a foundation for a new story. I suspect that if we can offer you one thing in the next hour, it would be the capacity to take a new perspective, to imagine yourself, your circumstances, your organization, your nation, our planet in a new light. And there was a story that I once heard of two fish, a young fish and an older fish, who were swimming along. And as they swam on their way, they met a third fish. They stopped and said hi and greeted each other. And the third fish asked them, "How's the water?" The older fish said, "Oh, it's just fine." And then they each swam along on their way. And after a few moments, the young fish turned to the older fish and said, "What's the water? What's the water?" Most of the time, many of us do not understand the waters we swim in, the patterns that drive us, the thoughts, ideas, beliefs that have formed us, and the ways in which we behave without choice, imagining we're free, when in truth we're much less free than we imagined. So if we can explore some of those ways that we're on automatic, if we can have the capacity to take a perspective on those behaviors, those beliefs, those patterns of culture and society, it may become easier for us to reimagine a world at a time when such new imagination, new creativity, and new perspectives are so important.
Thank you. We've been charged by Father Thomas to speak of spirituality for sustainability. We want to be clear with you on our definitions before we go any further. Spirituality, an inner path to one discovering one's essence. And we would add to that, and living one's deepest values in the world. Spirituality. Sustainability. The ability of one generation to meet its own needs while not disturbing the needs of the next. Sustainability. Then there's that little preposition, for. Spirituality for sustainability. The question we pose is, how can we learn to place our spirituality in the service of sustainability? Indeed, there have been many paths of spirituality that have, in fact, disturbed that possibility of sustainability. And we'll explore some of that with you today, particularly some of the Western orientations. We also want to offer that we do believe there's a right and a wrong and a good and a bad. Right and good, that which contributes to the most and the best of what life is about on earth. Bad, wrong, that which destroys life on earth. Why is this important today for all of us? 75% of our forests are gone. 90% of our fish in our oceans are gone. 2 billion people on this planet live on less than $2 a day. One that was a shocker to me at this time that I've not thought much about is the fact that 200,000 people per day are becoming what are called environmental refugees and being moved from their indigenous place of home. All of this could serve as evidence that we don't matter. All of this could bring a sense of pain, hopelessness. We're inviting a different possibility. Remember, pain happens because there was once a love. It shows us how much something matters to us. Think in your own lives of your relationship to the natural world. Think of times that inspire you, shared times, and what does it involve? What does it include? Is nature a part of your picture? And how is it honored? One of the great requests these days is to become an avid appreciator and not an exploiter, and to move from consumer to citizen. And what does that mean? And how big is our family? How big is the family that you're willing to hold in your heart? Michael, you've talked about the dilemma of our being able to live our values, how we are programmed by a certain type of cultural norm, and that sometimes we hold a higher aspiration, and that sometimes it's difficult to live that out on a daily basis. Can you speak about that?
Walking our talk, or bringing consistency to our words and our actions, is a great challenge. It's spoken of in all the great spiritual traditions, but it's often not so easy, which is probably why it's spoken about in the great spiritual traditions. Our life circumstances, our desire and need for survival, our efforts to overcome the challenges to our existence and to life itself can be great. I think the current historical situation in India illustrates that well. Well, most of the people, if not all of the people in the room today at St. Claret's, are well educated and have a reasonably good standard of living. There are enormous numbers of people on the subcontinent who still remain in poverty, who barely have enough to eat, and who are struggling for survival. And so, beginning to understand what it is that we deeply care about, and seeing if we're able to actually put that concern into action, is a very, very worthwhile endeavor. I think that the great Indian leader, Mahatma Gandhi, addressed this question frequently, making efforts to bring his deep values, his spiritual essence, into action, and to invite others to think and act from that deeper place. And while he may not always have seen into the future or understood the changes that would be taking place in the global economy, he had the courage and insight to name his deepest values and to call people to a higher standard. And his influence certainly was large and enormous in the Indian independent movement, and his impact on the civil rights movement in the United States and on Dr. Martin Luther King is well known and quite significant. And it is quite astounding, I know, in this country, the enormous differences that have taken place in our culture over the last 50 to 60 years, particularly in regard to the issue of civil rights and segregation. And so it is possible for us to make enormous changes, even when we face difficult and what sometimes seems to be intractable circumstances, difficult and even intractable circumstances. And so I think getting in touch with our deepest values, with what we truly want for our life, for the lives of our friends and family, for the lives of our community and nation, and for the life that we increasingly share and whose interdependence is increasingly apparent across the entire planet. Getting in touch with those deepest values is very important. And while it may at times be challenging, at times be difficult, at times there may be a delay in our ability to put those values into progress, without an awareness of what they are and holding them in our consciousness, without understanding the ways in which our circumstances, our patterning, our hidden beliefs sometimes impede our capacity to move toward those values. Without those awarenesses, it's never possible for us to move forward. And so a bit more awareness, a bit more understanding, and a bit more historical perspective is valuable, and I think essential in these times.